How did the Soviet Army fail despite the fact that they outnumbered the enemy? The first 2 months of the Soviet-Finnish War 1939 to 1940 were unsuccessful for the Red Army. Her formations were unable to break through the defenses of the Finnish army on the Karelian Isthmus and were defeated in other directions. The failure of the plan to quickly defeat Finland showed that additional forces and intense combat training were needed to turn the tide in the war. By the end of November 1939, the Soviet command concentrated 19 rifle divisions, 5 tank and 2 motorized rifle brigades, and significant aviation forces on the border with Finland and in the immediate rear. They numbered about 350,000 men, 2,500 guns and mortars, over 1,300 tanks and 1,700 aircraft. The Finnish army consisted of 180,000 soldiers and officers, about 700 guns, 112 aircraft, and 25 tanks. The main blow was supposed to be delivered on the Karelian Isthmus by the 7th Army under the command of Commander Vsevolod Yakovlev. It had 9 rifle divisions, 4 tank and 2 motorized rifle brigades, and consisted of about 180,000 people and 850 tanks. It was supposed to be strengthened. The opposing Finnish troops had about 100,000 soldiers and officers, more than 350 guns and 25 tanks. The Soviet command intended to defeat the main enemy forces within 3 weeks, occupy Vyborg and Keksholm on the Karelian Isthmus, and reach the Gulf of Bothnia in the Ulu region, cutting off Finland from Sweden. However, the Soviet command overestimated the advantage in technology and the possible instability of the Finnish army. The superiority of the Red Army and people was compensated by the better training of Finnish soldiers and junior officers. Subsequent battles revealed the lack of heavy guns to destroy the fortifications, the lack of information about the new enemy defenses, and the weak interaction of infantry with tanks. The 49th Rifle Division of the 7th Army was the first to reach the main line of fortifications of the Mannerheim Line at the mouth of the Taipaleenjoki River on the evening of December 2. It was planned to land troops from the ships of the LADOGA flotilla in the rear of the Finns, but it was canceled due to the lack of transport ships. The division crossed a non-freezing river up to 180 meters wide, on the elevated left bank of which the enemy fortified. For the crossing, the 49th Division was reinforced with a regiment of the 142nd Division, a high-capacity artillery regiment, and 2 pontoon battalions. The division commander, Brigade Commander Pavel Vorobyov, ordered the use of a smokescreen, but Commander Yakovlev forbade its use. The artillery preparation on December 5 did not suppress the enemy's firing points. Out of the 3 occupied bridgeheads, only 1 was held. In addition, the Finns destroyed the ferry park of one of the pontoon battalions. The captured bridgehead, 2 kilometers along the front and 3.5 kilometers in depth, became the site of bloody battles. On December 9, instead of the 19th Regiment, units of the 150th Division advanced from the reserve were transferred to it. Its 469th Regiment occupied the village of Kaukaniemi, but due to losses, it was soon withdrawn to the 2nd Echelon. On December 19, after the replenishment of parts, the attacks resumed until December 22, when the order came to stop them. Parts of the 49th Division only from December 3 to December 11 lost about 3,000 people killed, wounded, and missing, more than 20% of the personnel and about half of the rifle companies. Problems were also found in the 90th Division. On December 3, the battalions of her 286th Regiment lost their orientation near Lake Vokjarvi and wandered around it all night. The next day, battalions of the 588th Regiment lost their way, which led to a skirmish with a battalion of the 286th Regiment. Soon the division was transferred to the Kiviniemi area. Komkor Yakovlev ordered to force the neck of Lake Suvantojarvi from the march without preparation and lagging behind on the march of artillery and a sapper battalion. The crossing began at about 16.30 and continued at night. Part of the pontoons were carried away by the current. Others sank from enemy fire. Only 4 pontoons with soldiers and commanders of 3 companies reached the shore. An attempt to strengthen the bridgehead with T-37 amphibious tanks was unsuccessful. 5 got stuck on pitfalls and obstacles, 1 turned over, and the remaining 2 could not get out to the left bank. Those who landed, with the exception of a few fighters who returned by swimming, were killed or captured during the Finnish counterattacks. Drama in LADOGA. The Red Army did not achieve success in other directions, where its formations sought to go as deep as possible into the territory of Finland. Farther than others, 100 kilometers, in the first days, the 139th Division of the 8th Army advanced. Its commander, Brigade Commander Nikolai Belyaev, formed detachments to bypass the enemy's defenses. One, as noted in the combat log, fornicated and did not complete the combat mission, and the second returned on the orders of the command. By this point, the regiments of the division were exhausted by long marches and bad food due to lack of food. The Finnish command, hoping for the strength of the defense on the isthmus, transferred reinforcements to eliminate the most dangerous penetrations. The 16th Infantry Regiment of Lieutenant Colonel Uro Päiväri and separate battalions acted against the division. On the night of December 13, the Finns bypassed the regiments of the 139th Division from the flanks. The units began a disorderly retreat. During the fighting, which lasted until December 17, the 139th Division and the 75th Division, which arrived at the front on December 14 to 15, retreated 60 to 70 km. Parts of the 139th Division from December 8 to 17, 1939, lost 1,800 soldiers and commanders killed and missing and 1,570 wounded, 25% of the personnel. 2,200 rifles, about 400 machine guns, and more than 20 guns were left behind. Belyaev was removed from his post for the defeat. However, the 75th and 139th Divisions were not surrounded and defeated. The 8th Army's main attack on Sortavala was delivered by the 18th and 168th Rifle Divisions and the 34th Light Tank Brigade. By December 10, they occupied the city of Pitkiranta. On December 18, one of the regiments of the 168th Division advanced 35 to 40 km northwest of the city. By this time, the Finnish command had concentrated the main forces of its 12th and 13th Infantry Divisions against the Soviet divisions. The Finns seeped into the gaps in the battle formations of the Soviet troops, interrupted communications, and attacked the carts. On December 28, they managed to intercept the Lavajärvi-Lemeti road and make it difficult to supply advanced units. Attempts to knock the enemy out of the way were unsuccessful. On the contrary, the Finns took advantage of the passivity of the command of the 18th Division and the 34th Brigade, which did not actively use tanks, and cut through the Lemeti garrison, which had more than 100 tanks and significant infantry forces. The 168th Rifle Division, with outside support, established a road on the ice of Lake LADOGA, held its positions, retaining most of its personnel and weapons. More tragic was the fate of the encircled units of the 18th Infantry Division and the 34th Light Tank Brigade, numbering about 12,000 people. On January 16 to 19, the Finns divided the encircled into 6 garrisons. 4 of them were completely destroyed by the Finns in February, 1 was partially destroyed, and only 1 garrison successfully broke through to the main forces. Defeat near SUOMUSSALMI. In the early days, the formations of the 9th Army did not meet with serious resistance from the cover units inferior to them in strength. But after the occupation of the village of SUOMUSSALMI by the 163rd Division on December 17, the Finnish headquarters transferred the 9th Infantry Division and a separate brigade to the north. On December 21, the Finns managed to reach the communications of the 163rd Division, destroy part of the convoys, and threaten the encirclement of its main forces. Having lost a supply, the 163rd began to withdraw. From the beginning of the war until the end of December, she lost 890 people killed, 1,415 wounded, more than 450 prisoners and missing, and about 300 frostbitten, 130 machine guns, 17 cannons of various calibers, and 140 vehicles. Having inflicted a defeat on the 163rd Division, the 9th Division, reinforced with reserves, attacked the 44th Division. The 146th Regiment managed to beat off the first attack of the enemy, but on the night of January 2, the Finns attacked it again and cut the road along which the 44th Division stretched out in two places. On January 3, its commander, Brigade Commander Alexei Vinogradov, went to one of the regiments and tried to clear the road, but the attacks did not reach their goal. The actions of the shooters and artillerymen were hindered by convoys. In addition, the sapper and reconnaissance battalions, due to the chaotic unloading, were the last to unload and ended up at the tail of the column. On January 4, the enemy intercepted the road in two more places and cut off the strike group from the main forces of the division. The reconnaissance battalion and the 3rd Border Regiment, which were going to help her, were also stopped, and the withdrawal of the battalion of the 146th Regiment, exhausted by battles and lack of hot food, opened the left flank of the division. On January 6, her command tried to withdraw people and heavy weapons from the encirclement. Having received permission from the Army headquarters at 10 p.m. on January 6 to act on their own initiative, Vinogradov ordered people to be withdrawn north of the road, rendering the material unusable. The exit from the encirclement lasted several days. From January 1 to January 7, the division lost more than 3,200 soldiers and commanders killed and missing and 1,430 wounded. More than 5,500 small arms, about 350 machine guns, more than 100 guns and mortars, and 37 tanks remained on the battlefield. On January 11, the military tribunal of the 9th Army condemned Vinogradov, the chief of staff of the division, Colonel Onufry Volkov, and the head of the political department, Regimental Commissar Ivan Pakomenko, to death. The sentence was carried out before the formation of the division. Soon the Finnish headquarters invited foreign journalists to the battle area. A number of newspapers published articles and photographs, often exaggerating the scale of the defeat at SUOMUSSALMI. Moscow masked the defeat with lies. Failures pursued the Red Army not only in the snows and forests. The Soviet Air Force, despite its overwhelming superiority, failed to suppress the enemy's defenses and disrupt the work of industry and transport. On the front of the 7th Army in December 1939, there were 6 cases of bombardment and shelling of friendly troops. In turn, an air defense platoon of the 39th Regiment of the 4th Rifle Division shot down 2 I-16s of the 68th Fighter Aviation Regiment. On December 1, during takeoff, one of the pilots of the 1st Mine Torpedo Aviation Regiment of the Baltic Fleet crashed into a bomb storage. The explosion disabled most of the aircraft for 2 to 3 weeks. On December 26, 3 aircraft of the 21st Long-Range Bomber Regiment lost their bearings and dropped 30 bombs on the Ruzino station near Leningrad, none of which reached the target. Finally, on January 6, 1940, 8 aircraft of the 6th DBAP received the task of destroying the radio station in Lahti. The group made 5 visits. One of the planes was shot down by Finnish anti-aircraft guns. When it was attacked by fighters, the pilots, instead of forming a defensive formation and repelling the enemy with organized fire, tried to get away from the Fokkers due to speed. The formation fell apart. 6 of the 7 aircraft were shot down, and the one that reached the airfield was not subject to recovery. The unsuccessful actions of the Red Army on the land front and in the air forced its command to stop the offensive.